Ever scroll through social media and seen your ex pop up?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe with a new partner,
Ugh,
and you just felt that little twinge.
I know exactly what you mean.
Or maybe you're in a situation now where you're thinking about staying friends with an ex.
Hmm.
It's a question that, well, I think a lot of us wonder about. Can you really be friends with someone you used to, be romantically involved with?
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to dive deep into today. Is it actually possible, or is it just asking for trouble?
What I find so interesting about this topic is it's just so divisive.
Right.
Everyone seems to have a strong opinion about it, and a lot of times it comes from, personal experience.
Oh, for sure. And to get it started, we're going to be looking at an episode from the Love, Loss, and Lessons podcast.
Okay.
It's called The Battle of the Exes. Can you really be friends?
Catchy.
Right? They actually ran a poll on their Instagram, and the results were pretty interesting.
Oh, I love a good poll.
Yeah.
What did they find?
Only 30% of the people who responded said they'd been able to have a successful friendship with an ex.
Wow. So that means
Yeah.
70% said it was either impossible
Yeah.
or just way too
It's
complicated.
a pretty big split.
Yeah, it really shows you there's no easy answer.
No.
And it's all about the people involved.
Right.
What happened?
Yeah, it's definitely not one size fits all. To really highlight that, the podcast included some stories from their listeners.
Oh, cool.
Real people who've gone through this.
I love those.
Me too. So one listener, Emma, she decided to try and stay friends with her college sweetheart after they broke up.
Okay.
She thought it'd be fine, but it ended up being really tough for her.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Her story is a great example of how, trying to force a friendship can actually make it harder to move on.
Yeah, I can see that.
Her ex kept, kind of popping back into her life, making it hard for her to actually let go and move on.
So it's like they were never really able to fully separate.
Right. Were they really just friends, or was there something more going on under the surface?
Yeah, you have to wonder about that.
I know. It seems like Emma's experience really shows how easy it is to mistake, maybe some leftover feelings for actual friendship, which a lot of us can probably relate to, right? Like checking your ex's social media
Oh, yeah.
or secretly hoping to get back together.
All the time.
So you really got to ask yourself, are you really looking for friendship, or is it something else?
That's a good question.
Okay, so Emma's story, not exactly a success story.
Right.
But then there's Alex, another listener from the podcast.
Okay.
And their story was totally different from Emma's.
Oh,
Alex has been friends with her ex for years,
wow.
and they've both moved on and have new relationships.
Well, that's great.
I know. So what's interesting about Alex's story is they both said the breakup was actually pretty healthy. They understood they weren't meant to be together, but they still cared about each other.
Oh.
And they were able to shift that caring into, a friendship, supportive one.
I see.
But they were really clear that boundaries were key for them. They limit contact. They avoid talking about certain things. And they're just really aware of each other's feelings.
Yeah. It makes you think, even when both people think they're emotionally ready for a friendship, how can you tell if one person's maybe not being totally honest with themselves?
That's a really good point.
What if they still get jealous or upset when their ex starts dating someone new?
Yeah, that's tough.
How do you know if you're really over the romantic feelings?
You're right. Wanting to be friends is one thing, but actually being able to separate yourself emotionally,
Yeah,
that's a whole other thing.
totally. And it brings up another really important thing when it comes to being friends with an ex: timing.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Because jumping into a friendship right after a breakup,
Right.
when everything's still so raw,
Yeah.
probably not a great idea.
No. You need time to, process everything.
To heal is exactly.
The Love, Loss, and Lessons podcast talked to Dr. Emily Harper.
Okay,
She's a clinical psychologist who specializes in relationships.
interesting.
And she said that trying to be friends too soon is like trying to run a marathon without training.
Oof. Yeah.
You're just setting yourself up for pain.
They're going to get hurt.
Yeah. So think about your own situation, How recent was the breakup? Are things still really emotional?
Right.
If so, maybe jumping into a friendship isn't the best move.
Okay, so we've got emotional readiness and timing. Those are two big ones.
Your big ones.
But there's more, right?
Oh.
Even if you're both ready emotionally and you've given it some time, there's still the whole issue of boundary.
Boundary.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that can be a tricky one,
It can.
because what exactly are healthy boundaries when it comes to an ex?
Right.
It's not always so clear cut.
It's not like there's a rule book for this.
No. So that's what we're going to talk about next.
Yeah, let's get into that.
what do those boundaries actually look like? And how do you even have those conversations about setting them?
The awkward conversations.
The awkward conversations.
Yeah.
So, yeah, boundaries, super important. But how do you actually figure out what those boundaries should be?
It's really going to depend on the people involved in the situation, right? What works for one couple might be a total disaster for another.
Okay, yeah, I get that. But are there any examples? Like, what are some things people should think about when they're trying to set boundaries with an ex?
Well, think about the things that could make you feel confused, or bring up old feelings.
Like late night texting.
Exactly. Late night texting. Those kinds of interactions, especially if you're the one always reaching out, can blur the lines and make it harder to move on. It's important to ask yourself, is this really just friendly, or am I hoping for something more?
Yeah, that makes sense. You got to be honest with yourself about what you're really after.
Right. And another thing to think about is physical touch. Like, is it okay to hug? What about, like, casually touching their arm when you're talking? Those are things you might want to decide on up front.
Oh, yeah, good point. Because that kind of stuff can be tricky, especially when you have a history. You might be sending the wrong message even if you don't mean to.
Exactly. And then there's talking about your current dating lives.
Oh, yeah.
For some people, it's no big deal. But for others, it's really awkward or even painful.
I can see that. I mean, it's easy to say you're over your ex, but then they start dating someone new, and suddenly you're feeling jealous.
Yeah, you never know how you'll react until you're in that situation. This reminds me of a friend who tried to stay friends with her ex. They agreed not to talk about new relationships.
Uh-oh.
But then he started seeing someone new, and my friend found out from other people. She was devastated, and it totally ruined their friendship.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Yeah, so communication is key.
Right.
Right, you got to be upfront about what you're comfortable with and what you're not.
Exactly. And those boundaries, they might change over time. It's an ongoing conversation.
Yeah. And you have to respect each other's needs and boundaries, even if you don't agree with them.
Absolutely. Thinking about all this makes me realize being friends with an ex takes way more self-awareness than a regular friendship.
You have to be really in tune with yourself.
You do. Dr. Harper actually talked about that on the podcast. She said it's like learning a new dance.
Okay.
You have to pay attention to your steps, be aware of your partner, and just be ready to adjust.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So it's not just about wanting to be friends. It's about having the emotional skills to actually make it work.
Yeah. And even then, there's no guarantee. Which brings us to something else that's really important to remember.
What's that?
It's okay if a friendship with an ex just doesn't work out.
So sometimes it's better to just walk away.
Sometimes, yeah. Even if you still care about the person.
I get that, but it's still hard, especially when you have all that history together, all those memories. But you're right, you have to put yourself first, even if it means letting go of someone you care about.
Yeah, and sometimes creating that distance, it can actually lead to a healthier relationship down the road, maybe even a friendship, once the dust settles and you've both moved on.
So maybe it's not goodbye forever.
Right.
It's more like hitting pause for a bit.
Exactly, like hitting the reset button.
This whole conversation's got me thinking, why do people even want to be friends with an ex in the first place? Sometimes it's because they genuinely value the friendship and want to keep that person in their life.
Yeah.
But sometimes maybe it's because they're scared of being alone, or they feel like they should stay friends.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's really important to figure out why you want this. Like, what are you hoping to get out of it? Be honest with yourself about that.
So if you're in this situation right now, think about it. Really ask yourself, are you really over your ex? Could you see them with someone else and be okay with it? Are you trying to fill some kind of void in your own life?
Those are tough questions, but they're important ones. If you're not completely over the romantic part of the relationship, or if you're still hoping to get back together, trying to be friends is probably going to end badly.
Yeah.
It's like building a house on a foundation of sand.
It's not going to hold up.
It's not. And even if you are over them, there's still the question of whether the friendship would actually be good for both of you. Like, do you agree on what the friendship means? Do you have similar values? Those are things you think about in any friendship, but they're even more important when there's a romantic history.
For sure. And you should also think about how your current partner feels about it, If you have one, are they okay with you being close with your ex? And if they're not, are you willing to put their feelings first, even if it means not being friends with your ex?
It's a lot to consider. This is not an easy decision. It's not. But at the end of the day, it's up to you to decide whether or not to stay friends with an ex. There's no right answer. Hopefully this deep dive has given you some things to think about and some tools to help you make the best decision for you.
Definitely. I feel like I understand the whole thing so much better now and all the potential problems to watch out for. But what I'm taking away from this is putting yourself first is the most important thing. Sometimes walking away is the best thing you can do, even if it's hard. And sometimes a really great friendship can come out of a romantic relationship that's ended.
It's true. Relationships can be full of surprises.
Well said. I think we've really dug into this question today. And we've seen that there's no easy answer. We've heard about real people's experiences. We've learned from an expert. And hopefully we've helped you think about your own experiences and what you might do next.
Yeah, this is a topic that never gets old.
It really doesn't. So wrap things up. There's no right way to deal with relationships with exes. Listen to your gut, put yourself first, and remember that sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is let go and start fresh. Thanks for joining us today on The Deep Dive. See you next time.